The views, information, or opinions expressed during the Seeds of Wellbeing series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the University of Hawaii College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, or funders, and any affiliated organizations involved in this project. Welcome to a Seeds of Wellbeing, Voices from the Field podcast featuring voices of Hawaii agriculture producers for Hawaii agriculture producers. These podcasts are made possible by a grant from the University of Hawaii College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, also known as CTAHR, and the Seeds of Wellbeing, or SO project, and is supported by a grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
I think I unexpectedly really just fell in love with the act of producing food. It's kind of cliche, but maybe it's cliche for a reason, of just like planting this little seed and then seeing it manifest and become, a carrot or an eggplant or a tree. Like it's super, we take it for granted, or I took it for granted at least. But it's so magical and amazing, and it's like this very important thing for our survival. So it's super practical.
If you have lived on Oahu during the COVID pandemic or more recently, then you probably already know about FarmLink. In this episode, we speak with its founder, Rob Barreca, about the pre-COVID days of this online, local-only food marketplace, and also how it's grown by leaps and bounds since. We find out how he went from geek for good to CEO of an innovative new Hawaii-based company and is now firmly in the role of Chief Technology Officer to ensure FarmLink's success into their promising future. Aloha, welcome to another Seeds of Wellbeing, Voices from the Field podcast. Today we have with us, thanks for joining us, Rob Barreca from FarmLink. Hey Rob, how's it going?
Hey Jim, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, I've been trying to track you down for a few months now, been following what you've been doing for a number of years. But I think if you want to give us a little background to start with, what got you to Hawaii and what got you to a point where you wanted to start FarmLink?
Yeah, so I came out to Hawaii in 2007, February 13th, 2007. And I was born and raised in California, Northern California. And probably when I was about 15, 16, my mom got me this huge, I don't know, couple thousand page, total nerd alert here, HTML4 book. And she was like super subversive. She just kind of like set it on the table. And so I don't know, this is 1996 or something. And this is going to connect to how I got here. And she was always kind of like, nurturing my math side and giving us little like math workbooks and stuff. And I don't know, my brain is just wired for that. But yeah, the web was just kind of like becoming more of a thing then. And she's like, oh yeah, there's like the World Wide Web is out there, and you can actually like learn how to make your own web page. And I don't know, she got me that book, and it was just like, it just triggered something in me. It was so interesting and exciting, and just like this Wild West, both the web itself and just like that finding a creative outlet for kind of a more math engineering guy was really cool. And so, yeah, 16 years old, I started messing around creating little web pages and stuff. And I think I was working at the movie theater, the local movie theater in Sebastopol, California. I remember I was making $5.15 an hour training wage. So I worked there for, I don't know, 6 months, and I was learning how to make little web pages. And then I think my mom got me an internship at Autodesk, which is in like the North Bay in California, and kind of just started me on this career of being able to make some money as I was going through high school and then through college of making web pages for people. And it was, yeah, super interesting, exciting. So, that evolved and just kind of kept on that career path and started doing more, semi-serious programming, web application development for clients, kind of just doing it as a consultant and also subcontracting for some companies. And then went to school in San Diego and lived there for a couple years after, and was just ready to go somewhere new. And me and one of my best friends, James, we call him Slow James, in San Diego, we're like, let's go move to Japan. And he was going to teach English, and I was going to do some digital nomad stuff, do web projects, and we just like travel Southeast Asia and go explore and surf and cruise around. But James's nickname is Slow James for a reason. He just takes forever to get ready to go anywhere, whether it's out to lunch or moving to Japan especially. And I was ready to go, and he was just taking forever. So I was like, well, maybe I can find a month-long contract somewhere. And I was looking around on Craigslist in San Diego Craigslist or something. And I see some posting for web contract, 1 month long, for a company called Chip In, all one word. And I answered it and found out they were based in Hawaii, but they were okay with somebody, working remote. So we did a short contract together where I helped them build a web app for UC Berkeley. It was like a UC Berkeley project for people that had like a big idea. So my contact was Olin Lagan, which he's amazing. Thank you, Olin, for getting me out here. But Olin's still involved in the tech community in a lot of really great ways. But Olin and I kind of just worked remotely on this UC Berkeley project. And then I think Olin and one of his, a co-founder, Arnett Williams of Chip In at the time, said, hey, that was a great little project you did for UC Berkeley. We actually have this startup that's doing a lot more other stuff, and we're looking for people to come out. Would you be interested in coming out to Hawaii and working for another month or so? So I said, yeah, that'd be great. That's halfway to Japan. So waiting on Slow James to pack his bags and set up his English teaching job in Japan. So I'll come to Hawaii for a month, and then I'll continue on my way to Japan and keep sort of living that life. And I don't know, long story short, I think we'll go back and forth a bit, but I'm still here. Slow James went to Japan, and I never moved to Japan. I've been here since, and we went and visited him, but that James was there for 3 years, and then he's back in San Diego. So I never quite made that leg of the full trip, but really glad I ended up where I am.
You got most of the way there.
Yeah.
And of course, I have to ask, are there any websites that you did in the early days that are still out there somewhere that we can take a look at? Oh my God. Link in the show notes.
I looked for one. I don't think it's there anymore. I don't even think that it was. I did one that I was really proud of. It was for the Holy Cow. It was like a bar in San Francisco, and I was using like at the time I think it was like Macromedia Flash, and I did this like now it's like pretty lame, but animated this like cow and then like a halo over it, and added some sound effect to it.
Nice.
I'm pretty darn sure that website is not there, or not what I did.
Well,
Um,
you can be sure I'm going to try to find an old copy of it and
oh, that'd be
put a
fun if you
link
did.
put a link out there for the
I'd
folks
love
that
to see it.
are watching or listening. So that got you to California. You're a coder, probably learning new things like Java and and things that keep you on your toes for as things change in the industry. So you're in Hawaii. Tell us how you got to FarmLink and how did that all come about? What's the link in FarmLink from that
Yeah.
perspective?
So I came out in 2007 and I was working at Chip-In, a bunch of incredible people there. Um, Olin, Carnett, Kevin, uh, Matthew McNeely. Yeah, a lot of really, really smart folks. Um, and I was working there from 2007 until I think it was 2013. So we ended up getting acquired by so we rebranded Chip-In to Sprout, and then Sprout was acquired by a global ad company called InMobi, based out of India. And we pivoted a bunch of times at Chip-In and then Sprout and into sort of advertising technology. Really like interesting cutting edge technology, but um, wasn't something that was like near and dear to my heart. Like the people and the engineering challenge was great, but I was, especially in the last few years working there, I was really kind of yearning for a bit more fulfillment or meaning in life. Like I wanted to be a geek for good, Jim. Um, and use some of these skills and do the work that I like to do, but have it impact the world in some way that meant something to me. So lucky enough that we were acquired, and I made enough money. It wasn't a huge payout, but made enough money to give me a couple years to kind of explore what the next phase of my life was going to be. Um, and I think this is kind of, as local food and farming sort of we're having a bit of a moment, just becoming a little more like sexy. And it was kind of, cool to be a cooler than it has been historically in the last, I don't know, hundreds or years or millennia ever, to grow food. And so I was interested in that realm, but I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And my first foray after leaving, in Moby, uh, was, I think I modeled it after a company called like Compost Cab in New York. They'd basically pick up food waste from restaurants or homes and then do thermal or verma composting and produce really good compost and then sell that. That was kind of the business model. And I think try to charge people to pick up their food waste too. So I tried that, to get something started there, and it just nothing was really clicking on multiple levels. And a friend said, "Hey, I heard about this program called Go Farm Hawaii. I don't know if that's like what you want to do, but I think you should just go and check it out and try it." And I was kind of hemming and hawing, and she was just like, "Just stop trying to analyze it. Like, just go do it." Um, and it's very low stakes. And if you don't like it, you can bail and do something else. And I really credit Go Farm Hawaii. I think it's the one of the best things that's going on in the food system in the state. I really credit them with giving me a focus, and I think I unexpectedly really just fell in love with the act of producing food. It's kind of cliche, but maybe it's cliche for a reason, of just like planting this little seed and then seeing it manifest and become, a carrot or an eggplant or a tree. Like it's super, we take it for granted, or I took it for granted at least. Um, but it's so magical and amazing. And it's like this very important thing for our survival. So it's super practical too. So that intersection is really neat. So yeah, went through Go Farm, Waimanalo. I think I was cohort 3 over there. And so the first, entry into the food system for me, or real one, was starting a farm. So went through Go Farm, graduated out of that program. Me and my partner, Larnie Keto, who is still a flower farmer with Pedal Metal. She's incredible. We started a farm, and she came up with the name. It was called Counterculture. And we weren't just going to grow fresh veggies. It was really a farm and ferment operation. So we used that concept, and applied to Kamehameha School's Pauahi Foundation's Mahiai matchup, which is a business plan competition. The winner of which I think gets like $25,000 in seed capital, and runner up I think got like 15,000. And then you get a 5-year free lease on 5 acres of Kamehameha School's land. And so we were awarded that. We got second place prize and a parcel, so some cash and a parcel up in Haleiwa to start a farm. So we, dove in. It was just a raw piece of land, jungle. And Kamehameha Schools helped us clear that one. And just went through kind of starting a farm from scratch, and then also learning the fermenting kind of like commercial kitchen side of everything there. So that was super informative as we started out doing that. But I don't know, typical, to my just distracted attention span, was as we were kind of starting that farm, we were selling some fresh produce as we kind of got the sauerkraut and kimchi product lines going. And I was really just seeing, and also from the Go Farm experience, working, with my fellow cohort members that were starting farms, I saw that we were all, like it's hard. And I thought the hard part was going to be all of the manual labor and working with plants and just all of the production side of agriculture. And I realized that is incredibly hard. But what felt even harder somehow, it's harder in a different way, but it felt harder somehow, was like everything that happened after you harvested, like all of this incredible produce, and then just like the marketing, sales, and distribution. There's lots of, everybody in spirit loves buying local. They love that concept. But when the rubber meets the road, you find out who really wants to go above and beyond and kind of deal with some of the challenges of actually buying local. So, just trying to find folks to take this really great product, and how to, with very limited time in the day, how to get that product to them. And so seeing that all of us in Go Farm, and started meeting other small and beginning farmers, or other experienced farmers, and just seeing how much of a challenge the marketing, sales, and distribution was. And so I really, like while the farm is still going, and brought out my friend from California to help start on the farm, Daniel Lees. I said, you know what, I want to just like start this, see if there's anything there in some sort of aggregator, some sort of entity that could help all of us, a bunch of small farmers that a lot of buyers don't want to work with directly because of the many challenges. Maybe we can all kind of hui up and have somebody that's like taking care of a lot of the marketing and sales and accounting and doing the distribution for us. Because there's kind of this awkward phase there where like the big distributors, big produce distributors locally, like they don't want to deal with a bunch of ragtag small producers. The big retailers, like, the brick and mortar grocery stores, and even, a lot of restaurants, they don't want to deal with it either. And so you're kind of in this place where it's like you can, go to some farmers markets, which, have limited uh, opportunity to sell, and also just take a bunch of time. When you're that small and starting out, like there's an opportunity cost for spending, a ton of time going to farmers markets versus putting that time into production, which is really like something that only the farmer can solve. But I felt like there was some opportunity to start something. It wasn't even called FarmLink at the time. It was kind of a little incubator born in Go Farm. I think we just called it like Go Farm, Go Farm sales website. The marketing, sales, and distribution felt like sort of this overlaying entity, like somebody else, some other entity could help everybody solve that and give them more time to solve the very like specific problems on their farm. And yeah, so FarmLink was kind of born. We got some grant funding, purchased at first we were driving around everybody's produce in coolers with ice in the back of my partner Larney's like 1998 Toyota Tacoma truck, little green machine. And then we got I think a loan through Ulupono Initiative and some grant funding to help us purchase a 16-foot refrigerator box truck. And yeah, in those early days, it was, a couple of us just doing all kind of the aggregation. We were doing pickup. We also had like decentralized refrigerated shipping containers on partner farms or on our own farm or at Go Farm, where, we would kind of do the sales side of going to restaurants, and Foodland was actually a really good early partner for us. We would say, hey, we have all this product from all of these growers, are you interested in buying it? And then we would, get those sales orders, and then we would communicate back to the growers and say, hey, okay, we need XYZ, this many pounds by this date to be dropped off at your local drop site. So, all around Oahu, producers would be, they just get a bunch of orders. It could be 10 restaurants and a few like a Foodland and a couple Down to Earth, like all just aggregated. They just got one order essentially from FarmLink and could harvest it all in one fell swoop, wash, pack, and then just drop it all at a refrigerated drop point like 10 minutes away from their farm, and then get back to the farm and continue to work on production. And then we would drive the 16-foot box truck around the island, pick up everything, and then be doing deliveries like all in the same day. So yeah, it was kind of a crazy time in those early days.
And this is about 8-9 years ago, when it was it officially FarmLink at that point?
Yeah, so I think pretty soon after we realized, okay, this is sort of bigger than Go Farm and branded it FarmLink. And I think that's 2015, so about 9 years ago.
Nice. And so that started to happen. So, well, maybe you still haven't given up your day job, but were you able to give up your day job at a certain point because there was enough volume and potential revenue?
Yeah, and I guess I left that part out. That after InMobi was acquired in 2011, I stayed on for a couple years and then left in 2013. And so I dove all into it. I had enough savings to kind of just live very simply for a couple years and try to figure out what the next move was. So I did kind of like leave tech. I needed a bit of a break. I was pretty fried at that point, and yeah, just wanted to dive into something else. So, started the farm, started FarmLink. And at that point, I should clarify that like FarmLink, we were using sort of off the shelf software. So it was a platform called Local Orbit, and was just trying to like build that as a this purpose-driven company at that point. But yeah, so from 2013 to 2015, it was kind of like flailing and trying to figure out what to do next. But then 2015 on, it was really like, okay, I'm spending 50% of my time, on the farm, helping, my partner like weed and plant, harvest, wash, pack, and then 50% of time kind of orchestrating and coordinating on the FarmLink side.
Okay, and so at a certain point, did FarmLink take over and you stop farming, or are you still farming now?
Yeah, I definitely am not in the field anymore. So I think I'm pretty sure, towards the end of 2019, I was still splitting my time, and I just realized like, okay, this is just crazy making. If I want, either to succeed, I'm going to need to focus on one. And I think more of my passion and experience and skill set really was on the FarmLink side and seeing where that was going. So, basically 98% on FarmLink, and was fortunate enough. So counterculture, the farm, I won't spend a ton of time on that, but we kind of did the kimchi and sauerkraut thing. And then, that was too much. So we stopped doing that and just focused on fresh vegetables. And then my good friend and somebody that Jim, Gabe Zactor Smith, who was actually, got his master's at CTAHR, but left for a period of time to go get some farming experience in the Pacific Northwest. We were chatting, and he said, "You know what? I miss bananas. I want to come back to Hawaii. Is there any way that we can work together?" And I was so excited to hear that for many reasons. But Gabe came back, joined the farm, and really has taken over the farm operation, and that's been shifted from veggies to bananas and rebranded as Hawaii Banana Source. So Gabe is totally running everything there, and I help do some admin stuff and help with QuickBooks, and we talk about some strategy and stuff like that. But really, yeah, most of my time has been on FarmLink since 2019, and it would have happened, the pandemic really would have forced my hand anyway. So it's kind of good. I had a few months to like mentally prepare as much as one could for that, which is pretty wild.
I was going to ask if COVID and the pandemic were material in the decisions, or was it just coincidental? And
yeah, I mean it's all a blur now, but I'm pretty sure just it was coincidental.
That's how did you manage through COVID? I mean, to me, it seems like perfect timing for food delivery. But what did you see as a result of COVID and how that impacted FarmLink?
Yeah, it was super crazy. Pre-COVID, FarmLink was, I think we were maybe like 3 or 4 employees. And I think revenue I should have looked this up earlier, but I think 2019 revenue, I think it was maybe like 400,000 for FarmLink. And most of the business at that point was still B2B, selling to brick and mortar grocery stores, restaurants, processors, and a couple schools like Malama Honua Charter School and maybe one others. So really B2B focused. And 2019, again, totally coincidentally, one of our biggest supporters and funders, Elemental Accelerator, had invested some money in us, and it was a project focused investment, and it was to start exploring direct to consumer sales, just what that would look like, because we had so many just individual household customers in the years prior say like, hey, I just love to, I'm just a normal household, I'd love to get this. And we had let a few friends kind of like sneak in just to try it out, but we only had a 16-foot box truck, and so you're driving a 16-foot box truck into some of these neighborhoods, and then like dropping the lift gate to get in the back. It was really challenging and difficult, and the website wasn't really geared towards direct to consumer sales. But in 2019, we started slowly kind of figuring out, okay, like what would this look like to expand this to household customers? And we had a few months of thinking about that, but March 2020 hit, and everything was shutting down, and it just we didn't have time to wait and be calculated and plan, because we had, between March and April, I think it was like 7,000 customers sign up, and to FarmLink. And we've never been, and don't ever plan to be like a subscription CSA service. I think that's a common misconception. We've always wanted to be this: you order what you want when you want. It's just a la carte. It's like Amazon for only local food. And so yeah, we had thousands of customers sign up. The website platform we were using, called Local Orbit, was crashing all the time. It didn't work well to handle that level of volume, especially just let alone all of those household customers. And we tried to set up like a wait list, and we had thousands of people on the wait list at a time. And people were super freaked out seeing empty shelves. And also there was the fear side, but then people just coming into relief that like, oh, this is really important to have a thriving local food system. So I want to support it, not just I'm scared of having food tomorrow. So yeah, it was just really insane time. Yeah, there's so many people to talk about that helped us through it. But yeah, I think like the sort of the macro view of it is, since it's the Geeks for Good podcast, I think I need to share that. I hope it doesn't like complicate things, but so we had counterculture. There was growing produce, and then fermenting, which is already like two businesses in itself, and then FarmLink, which is local food distribution. In 2019, the platform Local Orbit, which we were just a paying customer for, and I had been, like there's all kinds of things I wanted to see done to the platform. And I'd emailed the owners of that company and said, hey, like, I see like none of this stuff's getting fixed, and there's bugs that just have been around forever. Like, I would be open to just volunteering my time, and pro bono, I will just like help fix bugs and help improve the software platform for all your customers. But I know it'll benefit our business, benefit FarmLink. So like, can I please just donate my time and help on this platform? And I understand why they said no. Just like, who is this guy? And like, we don't know how to figure that out. And so I just kept badgering them for probably starting in 2018. And then 2019 came around, and the owner of that company emailed me and said, hey, actually, their company had two platforms, Local Orbit and something else. That other platform, that other software product, was getting acquired, and the acquirer didn't want to deal with this Local Orbit food thing. And the owner said, hey, if you either we're going to shut this thing down, or is there any way that you would like take this over and steward this? And they had over 50 other similar businesses to FarmLink, other food hubs across the country, and a couple in Canada. So I obviously didn't want to see it just the rug get pulled out from under us for FarmLink, and then thinking like, oh my gosh, like there's 50 other folks like us. So in addition to all those other things, I ended up taking over, as CEO, CTO, everything kind of for Local Orbit as like a software as a service product in 2019. So that was just kind of a wild time. And then, trying to fix bugs in that platform and figure out like a way to, it wasn't profitable, like trying to figure out a way to like fund this thing, and peeling back layers of the onion of the code and just seeing like, oh wow, this thing really, the intent was great, but like it's just spaghetti. There's so much technical debt, and just eventually seeing as the pandemic hit that like trying to put all that energy into FarmLink as just a business, and then trying to have this thing that all of a sudden became so essential for all of the customers on it, that there was just like no way to square it all. I'm sure if I was a savvier fundraiser, maybe there was a way through that, but it was just, lots and lots of 100-hour weeks that, I was at my wit's end. So in all of this crazy tangled web, I was figuring out a sunsetting plan for Local Orbit and trying to give everybody as soft of a parachute as they could and enough time as they could to like find another platform to migrate to. And that included FarmLink. So in 2020, thousands of customers trying to get food, through FarmLink using Local Orbit. We're also trying to figure out, okay, like, is there another platform out there that could just help us, that just automatically out of the box works for household customers better? And so we found one that seemed the least worst option out there, which is Delivery Biz Pro, which I do not recommend to anybody. And we can talk about that later, about sort of where we're going next. But yeah, we kind of migrated to a platform that at least was better than Local Orbit for household customers, and really just leaned into the direct to consumer thing and tried to, both ensure that producers had a place, had revenue coming in to their farms or their food business. And then also make sure that consumers, could access food, period. But also, be able to support local food. And, that's just been this, I feel super fortunate to work on, a problem in a solution like this, but, in all of our existence as a company or companies, really just being able to have this dual mission, and try to continue to ratchet both those up, provide better opportunity for food producers to sell more, get more for what they sell, and just give them more time to do the things that are really, inherent to being a farmer, and anything that sort of can be outsourced or, find efficiencies that we can help with those, and then make it really easy for customers to continue to discover and find all this amazing local food that's being produced, and have that flywheel continue to accelerate. So I don't even remember what you asked, Jim. I just went on maybe a tangent there, but I don't know. I felt like it's Geeks for Good. I had to bring the whole, hey, for a while there we ran a software as a service company.
Right.
While doing all this.
I remember seeing that on your LinkedIn, but maybe I just missed that, not knowing what it was. But
yeah,
I think
who knows?
I think it's kind of it's fascinating to me, certainly. And it makes me wonder, I mean, The Shopify platform is awesome. So many folks are adopting it. It's kind of eaten a lot of other platforms' lunch. And I know as an ag producer myself, right, and talking with ag producers that have used it or tried to use it, there's some limitations. It's not necessary as anything, like you said, um, you're always looking for the least worst, but when you're trying to find web platforms. But I think it leads me to think that maybe with some of the modifications and scripting you're doing for FarmLink, I wonder if that might be a piece that you could offer that could be of help to others, right? Just if they can steal some of your scripts to have it more conducive to what an ag producer needs. I know your needs are real specific related to your online sales and your delivery and all that, but I wonder, you think there's anything to that might be an option that you folks could offer if when you're through your migration, that might be edits and scripts others could use?
Totally. And it's something I get really excited about. And then I like try to, check myself and learn my lesson and just, okay, like try to focus on what's really essential right now, which is, having FarmLink sort of be the first, at least for what we're building. And so, yeah, we're migrating from our current e-commerce site over to Shopify and been working on that for months now and doing a lot of custom app development, as well as, custom theme development. And it's something we talk about a lot. Like what we're building, you said it's kind of specific to us. I actually, and I've heard other people say that. So it's specific in the realm of maybe of e-commerce. If you're selling t-shirts, you don't need any conception of this highly volatile supply of this perishable product that you need to sort of have accurate inventory and sell it as quickly as possible. And somebody ordering, groceries really needs groceries on that day. It's like, I'm ordering groceries for tomorrow, for Saturday. When you're ordering a t-shirt, it's like, oh, it'll be here in like 2 to 8 weeks. Like, that's cool. That's fine. I don't really care. I'm going to forget about it. And then it's going to arrive and I'm going to be stoked. And so it is, specific in sort of an industry, that it is, a perishable product, and, local food exacerbates a lot of that, those intricacies too, just local food, and really meaning like working with beginning, and smaller producers. If you have a mega farm that's just like, or, something like Driscoll's or something that's like, they're growing berries in the northern and southern hemisphere. And it's just like, they're pretty much always going to have raspberries for you. And, maybe you can just like assume, near infinite supply. But if you're working with, hundreds of small producers like we do, and they have products that are available on certain days of the week, but not others. And it goes up and down. And sometimes they think they have, 500 pounds and they have 30 pounds. But then some producers, are really consistent. So, if they say they have 500 pounds, we can probably pre-sell, let's say 450 pounds of that. Cause like they're generally, they're 90% accurate. And so, yeah, anyways, I'm sort of going into some of the functionality a little bit, but I think from broad strokes, we're building this custom stuff on top of Shopify because we didn't want to like reinvent a bespoke, e-commerce platform. And I've been looking at Shopify for the past 5 years. Every year, I'll like do a little dive and like kind of see what the developer ecosystem looks like. And really, every year until last year, it had felt like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's there to be able to support what we want to do. And, last year, I just continued to be pretty impressed with how extensible it is. You know, if you know how to code, I mean, even if you don't, but especially if you know how to code, you can do a lot on top of it. And last year, you know, it really just felt like, okay, if we as FarmLink want to get where we need to get, which is, you know, quadrupling in size from where we are now, we need a better, you know, or this is the way customers discover us, learn about us, explore and discover new products, and, you know, make their weekly, or, you know, some people order a couple times a week, but make their grocery orders. So trying to, you know, improve that experience for them. And, you know, we felt like, you know, we have a unique opportunity that myself and even another colleague in the company, you know, are highly technical, and sort of felt like we have, you know, I've got these very delicate non-farming fingers now, and I wanted to be able to like have some autonomy and put them to use for the benefit of FarmLink and for the local food system here. So yeah, really focused on, you know, let's just get our migration done, let the dust settle, like really be sort of the case study for this. But we are super excited about the potential of, you know, everything we're doing for FarmLink. And I'm getting all the way back to the specific comment I was making earlier, is not really specific. You know, food is the biggest retail industry globally by far. Like everybody needs to eat, and everybody spends money on food. And, you know, like, yes, ordering food online and getting it delivered, or, you know, going to pick it up, is like somewhat of a newer concept, or, you know, some of those pieces are. But what we're building actually is super common, you know, globally across food. So like, you know, and part of the benefit, you know, even though it was a crazy time running Local Orbit as a software as a service business, was I just feel so fortunate that I got to interact with those 50 other food hubs across the US and Canada. And, you know, sure, there are like a little differences in how we operate here and there, but those are totally on the margins. Like, the core of what everybody is doing is so similar. And, you know, keeping all of those stories in mind as we build what we're building for us. So, you know, it doesn't make sense just to, like, we've invested a lot of, you know, my time, other employees' time. We're contracting some folks to help. So putting a lot of investment, and we've benefited a ton from philanthropic organizations, as well as, you know, social impact investors and grant funding from USDA and others to just help FarmLink in general. But you know, everything we're doing, we feel, is totally applicable to a lot of food hubs and other, you know, smaller entities, that are just buying, aggregating, and delivering food. And we want the platform, you know, like, I feel like Hawaii is a great place. That anybody operating Hawaii's local food system, it's a great place to, you know, be the guinea pig for software like this, because, you know, FarmLink now, you know, we're not just sourcing from producers on Oahu, we're sourcing from producers all across the state. And, you know, it is really, people don't think this, you know, outside of Hawaii's ag scene, but growing food here is really, really hard. There's some things that just grow great and it's all good. But just from, you know, an agronomic sense, you know, it's, especially when you're trying to grow all these temperate veggies, land costs are high, labor is high. There's not a lot of equipment laying around that you can go borrow from somebody or learn from somebody else. So there's a ton of challenges to produce food here. We're doing air and ocean logistics to move food between islands. tons of traffic. Like there, I think we have, probably 9 out of the 10 challenges that are generalized over food systems globally. So to me, and maybe it's a little delusional, but I don't think so. Like if we can do it here and build something that works for FarmLink, for as complex as our operation is, and we're selling direct to consumer and to wholesale and to food access programs and dealing with SNAP EBT and all of these things. If we can make it work for us, I think it's totally generalizable to be a solution for others around the state, around the country, and the globe, really.
Nice. And I think, I mean, you're certainly focused on EBT and making that easier. I know you do free deliveries for EBT orders of any
Yeah.
size. I think you mentioned when we were talking earlier about one of the big deals about the replatform is to make EBT easier as well. And I know a lot of aggregators are really focused on that and have adopted that. But I can think, we've spoken with Hawaii Farm to Car folks, spoken with Tip Ag and what they're doing with food hubs, and I think there could be huge benefit to them. But I won't bug you for a year or two about that because I know you got to get through this yourself. But I think
Yeah.
that there's a huge benefit, and even just small scale mom and pop want to sell direct to consumer. I think there's probably a bunch of
Yeah.
modifications you're making that could make their lives so much easier. And most of those folks that I know aren't really script kiddies or aren't don't write their own code. So I think it would be a huge benefit. So that's my 2 cents related to that, because I think
That's great.
it's some of your big, hairy, audacious goals that you have on your website as well, of being
Yeah.
the driving force transforming local food. So
Yeah. I mean, I am super excited about the SNAP EBT side. I mean, we knew when we were getting into it. So right now, just to describe how it works currently. If you are a SNAP EBT recipient, you can go onto our website currently and place an order. First, we have to sort of you have to email us and we have to flip a switch on your account. But then if you have that switch flipped, you can go place an order and it doesn't charge your credit card. But you have to be at home when our driver shows up at your house. And so, FarmLink has we use technology everywhere we can. If you order on FarmLink, you get automated text messages as your order's out for delivery, and then you can track your driver on your smartphone. So you kind of can predict a little bit of when your driver is going to show up that day, but it's still a pretty big window, and you do physically have to be home. And swipe your EBT card. Our driver will swipe your EBT card, put in your PIN. But we're super excited about removing that constraint. And so if you have SNAP EBT, you can, the night before 10 p.m., you could go online, order, pay on SNAP EBT on the website in the future. And then you don't need to be home to get your order, because especially if you're in SNAP EBT, you probably have lots, you might be working multiple jobs and have challenges, with transportation or whatever it might be. So, even more so than folks that might not be a recipient of that. And so, yeah, trying to make it really convenient for them and give them access for that. Oh yeah. And then, I mean, the other aspect of that is the whole double up food bucks. So, the food basket on Hawaii Island administers the bucks for the state, which, everybody, so on FarmLink today, if you pay with SNAP EBT, you get automatic 50% off all produce, fruits, vegetables, poi, basically anything since we are just 100% local product on FarmLink, anything that's on our website that is purely, just fruit, vegetable, or water. So poi and some other things count. So integrating all of that into, SnapEBT Online, and because again, like um, those are not specific to Hawaii. Double Up Food Bucks is a program. I don't know that every state has it implemented, but I know many states do.
I think that'll make it much easier for folks, which is great. So thanks for all your work on that. Um, CTO, you're now CTO and not CEO, is that right? At FarmLink? Did you make
That's right.
was that around 2021? So yeah, what inspired that,
Yeah.
and how does that feel? Do you feel like you've handed it over to others or gotten through the founder's syndrome phase, or are you still kind of seen as that person?
Yeah. I mean, this is probably my biggest uh, achievement in my career. Was, I guess, creating something that attracted somebody like Claire Sullivan, who is our CEO now, to join the company. Because, still, she's been with the company for 2.5 years, I think. Yeah. So back ended in October, I think, 2021. She and I had been colleagues, and kind of we would chat probably for like 18 months prior to that. We would just have like a monthly call, just like, we enjoyed talking to each other. And at the time, she was part of the team that founded, or that started Whole Foods here in the state. So she used to get the Whole Foods mail delivered to her house. So like he was there from before there was even a Whole Foods in Kahala, and she was working there for 10 years, and really the driving force behind growing that local food program there. So at their peak, they were purchasing. She had the purchasing power and had developed the relationships and supply building to buy $12 million of local product a year. For comparison, FarmLink right now, we're purchasing. I probably this year we'll end up purchasing, close to 3 million, maybe 2.5 million, of money to farms. Um, so yeah, Claire and I were chatting just on that monthly call for a year and a half or so, and she was at Ma'o Organic Farm, which is, I think, one of the most incredible organizations in the whole state. I'm actually wearing the t-shirt today, coincidentally. Um, and Gary and Kukui and Cowie and Derek and everybody there is just, yeah, so amazing. Um, and they're one of our biggest suppliers now. But Claire was working at Ma'o for a few years, and then I think she was just, saw, she was looking for the next thing, a way to be more impactful, maybe on this like intermediary place where we sit. And so just in our conversations, it just kind of evolved. I think she heard me sharing, that I felt like, you know, I I have my certain things that I'm just drawn to, the types of work that I'm drawn to. And while I love all the humans, it's, I'm just not the right guy for that role. And I like starting things, um, but I don't necessarily like being the center of attention, or having some of those pressures, or having to navigate some of, a growing organization. There's just a lot of human challenges, and just ensuring, that like you're really taking care of the people inside the company, um, and also a lot of strategic thinking that, I saw that like I wasn't super happy in that role. And I think, I'd had enough time away from my like tech career burnout that I was really kind of missing that. And also just seeing like I want to be impactful and effective, and like my highest and best use, really, like I knew and know that it is working on the technology side. So kind of knowing that FarmLink needed somebody better in the CEO role, and that, I would be happier and better in a CTO type role. So I was super surprised that Claire was even, at all interested in it, just because I felt like she was just another echelon higher. But yeah, I think she saw the potential and of what we were building. And then I think also, she had built this incredible local purchasing program at Whole Foods, which was super meaningful, 12 million bucks a year. And they co-developed a lot of products with folks and encouraged some producers to get organic certification, because there's a market for that. And really was super inclusive, which is, I think, a spirit that she's brought in. When FarmLink started, we had a requirement that you had to be certified organic, or we had to ensure that you were following organic practices, but just hadn't got through certification. And I think I've evolved there a lot. Like, our banana farm that Gabe's running is USDA certified organic. I'm still a total proponent of organic, but realizing I wanted to be for something and to build something, as compared to being against something and wanting to destroy something or exclude a way of being, and wanting to broaden the tent. We don't let everybody in, and I think there's some producers that we will never work with because we don't agree with what they do, either the human or the ecology side. But yeah, really excited about working with somebody that has helped evolve the whole organization and the mission, and be in a much more constructive, generative taking a more constructive, generative strategy to try to get more people into this and say, hey, if we work together and we communicate and we collaborate, we can build something better that actually everybody's going to want, versus trying to say you are bad, you should not exist or not do your thing anymore, and we're only going to work with this. It's also just a practical thing. There's only so many people that are willing to actually produce food. It's really freaking hard in so many ways. And so, anybody that's willing to put themselves out there and grind and be the plant scientist, the chemist, the biologist, the plumber, the electrician, the soil scientist, the driver, the whatever, the million things that it is to produce food. We want to talk with you. We want to work with you. And something I think that she brought into the role and the DNA of the company is, transitioning from, or just recognizing that FarmLink's role is to be an activist buyer and to catalyze and encourage and actively take part in supply building, and not just expecting other people to figure it out and just come to our door and say, hey, I got this stuff, do you want it? And sure, we'll take it. And that's kind of the role of, that's how most buyers work. It's not, they don't see it's in their best interest to put their money where their mouth is. And it takes money and time to work with producers to help them scale up, help them find capital, find resources, all of these things that FarmLink, because we have our mission and we're holding to it of we are 100% locally grown or locally produced product. We've set those kind of blinders or those bumpers on. So we can't just be it'd be so much easier just to we can buy organic carrots from California for like 30 cents a pound. We don't need to actually like work with a amazing up and coming farmer on Hawaii Island to help them, find resources and grow their certified organic carrot farm, and have that scale up, which is something we're doing. And yeah, so I think, it's been such an amazing partnership, to be able to work with Claire and have somebody in that CEO role that's like, it's like she's incredible. And so I'm thankful and just motivated, being in the role. But it wasn't an easy transition. It's like, I was sort of the main founder, and it really, we didn't know what that was going to look like, and we just were communicated and worked through it, and it really, honestly, it probably took a couple years to like really make that transition like solid, and a lot of intentionality around just how do we communicate, how do we interact, who kind of owns what decisions, and making it really clear, like, okay, you own this decision. I can give you my input, but it's your ultimate decision. And finding just the way of organizing ourselves as a company, really, it's helped that, but it was also just like necessary to kind of like, it forced us to like confront some of those things too, which is yeah, really, really fun and interesting challenge.
Yeah, and it sounds like you got through the other end of it. So
Totally.
yeah, nice. And how many employees are you up to now? I think pre-COVID you said 4 or 5.
Yeah, so we're 34. We just hired one more. We're 34 employees, and I think we have two job postings out. So yeah, we'll probably, within the next couple months, we'll probably be 30, 36.
Well, and you
Which,
expanded meat, meat products is part of what you offer now, and so it's kind of
yeah.
all things. So what's next? I guess what do you see in the next few years? We talked about the web platform, but like, do you see expanding to other islands beyond Oahu? I know you're working with producers on the Big Island, but I don't think there's a farm link on any island for delivery except Oahu. So just kind of, what do you think? What do you see coming down the pipe?
Yeah, well, I think one aspect you just reminded me, we do so many things, like sometimes I forget to, touch on them. But I do want to talk about the meat thing for a second, because it's something interesting we're doing now, and also kind of there's a expansive bit of that. But a lot of folks maybe don't know, we have butchers on site. We actually do all of our own, or a lot of our own meat processing. We work with producer or ranchers on Oahu and on Maui and Hawaii Island, and we will get, we purchase the whole animal often. So we're purchasing whole beef carcass, whole pig carcass, and sometimes those are like cut into like primal, so they can like fit in a big box. But we're getting that essentially raw product in, and then we have amazing butchery. Actually, we've expanded the term. It's culinary department that are like cutting steaks, making sausage, roasting bones, making bone broth, lard. So all kinds of amazing stuff there, and that a lot of that is our again, our producer mission side of wanting to, the rancher wants to just be able to sell a whole animal, not have to deal with all the processing and only sell the high value cuts in the middle, and then be like scrambling, trying to figure out what to do with the rest. Like, the best thing for them, sell the whole animal, and they can focus on, producing really fantastic meat, and everything else on their farm. And so that department, we sort of did that out of necessity, just because there wasn't another meat processor that was doing it some smaller animals, and B, even for beef, doing it in a way that met our standard. But we are starting to expand that department. And so another kind of wild, interesting story. We were purchasing from Naked Cow Dairy on Hawaii Island, from Monique there. And, unfortunately she was shutting down the business. She has to move on. And they're really like the only cow dairy in the entire state that was like producing butter, at least, that we know about. If there's another one out there, please contact us. And she was, making this amazing product and purchasing cream from fantastic partners now at Meadow Gold Dairy over there. And we wanted to continue to have butter. And so, we asked Monique if she was open to selling us some of her equipment and coming and training our butchery staff to make butter. And so, I think last month we started making, a few weeks ago even, we started to, they're literally churning butter downstairs, and then other times cutting up whole pigs, among everything else that's going on. So that department is really expanding, and we're trying to figure out where are the gaps in the marketplace where there's not a producer making that product already, and does it make sense, and should we and can we do that in-house, at least even for a short period of time. If we found a producer that like wanted to take that on, and we could simplify our operation and focus on kind of getting something else from 0 to 1, like starting an industry, not an industry, but developing that product, kind of like an incubator. So yeah, culinary is kind of an area that we're exploring more and figuring out what to do there. And then I think, another area on the supply building side that we're really interested in is to, again, continue to play a more active role in helping producers increase supply. So, we did a pilot project. We've actually done a pilot project between Kamehameha Schools, who is an investor and amazing partner, also the tenant for Hawaii Banana Source, the farm that Gabe's running that I'm doing the QuickBooks for, and FarmLink. And so, KS has just been on a tear and, really just doing so many amazing things across the ecosystem. And, they serve a ton of meals on their campuses here, or their campus here. They wanted to get more local bananas. So they actually pre-purchased 80,000 pounds of bananas because we said, hey, we've got this farm, Hawaii Banana Source, that needs upfront capital. We had to fix a tractor, purchase a new tractor, get, manure spreader and trailer. There's just like all of these capital intensive things that we need to, do it in any kind of efficient way. And we also had a bunch of plants in the ground that like weren't going to produce fruit for 12 months. And so Kaya said, hey, we will give you the capital and you can pay us back over time on flexible terms, flexible like timing over the next 5 years in bananas. And that is just like, it's such a transformational thing, because it's a vote of confidence for sure. And then it's saying like, hey, you don't have to figure out where to market that. It's not just like a loan that you got to pay back on this fixed schedule, even though like plants just don't operate like that, especially, maybe in 30 years, we'll have it all super dialed in down to, the day of the week, you're going to get that thing. But like things happen. It's hard, like growing and building a farm. and they really understand that at community schools. And so, yeah, like Pia Chalk, Ken Tyson, and the rest of the team there said, hey, let's do this. And FarmLink is actually sort of like the facilitator in that. So, we like the contract is kind of with FarmLink, and then FarmLink has a contract with Hawaii Banana Source. And so, FarmLink, if needed, can find another banana producer, in periods of low yield on the banana farm, on Hawaii Banana Source farm. And like there's a lot of logistics to work out, and just like accounting and like making sure all of that's good. But we've started to kind of like figure all that stuff out, and that's been really powerful. And we want to find other producers to do that with, either match them up directly with funders. Like, we don't need to be in the middle of it, but for this case it made sense, sort of from a delivery logistics standpoint. So for sure, just trying to be more active in supply building. Yeah, it's a really exciting and just needed thing. And it's got so many positive impacts on the local economy and ecology and just our future growth plans to have that product next year or the year after.
I'll add my voice to kudos to KS for what they're doing for the Hawaii food systems in so many ways. Like, we have a couple podcasts, actually, Seeds of Wellbeing podcasts that we've done with the folks at KS, and one of them is talks a little bit about their goal of having 50% local food by 2025. And so I think it sounds like your banana initiative is maybe a piece of that puzzle for them.
For sure. Yeah. And I was pretty impressed. They're already, I forget what the number was, but I think it was like 20-ish%. Like they've made a lot more progress than other folks who I think are, have more lip service than actual action on the ground. So yeah, I'm stoked on what they're doing.
And then on some islands especially, I think, because like, I'll ask another time, just maybe selfishly because I'm on the Big Island, but do you think that FarmLink will ever have food delivery on the Big Island, or is that like you got a few years to make sure things are stable on Oahu before you look at expanding, or maybe never at all?
Yeah, we get this question from all the islands, pretty often. We don't have any plans to do that yet. There's most of the population is on Oahu, and we're not, financially, full disclosure, like we are not a profitable company. We're not breaking even. We're still heavily dependent on grants and investment. So we really want to figure our stuff out here, where most of the density is. And if we nail it here and there's no other folks on the neighbor islands that we can help lift up, because maybe there's somebody trying to do it over there, but maybe we can help them on the software side and best practices, and consumers can get the same benefit, but we don't necessarily need to expand. So I mean, that's an option, but like who knows? We might expand down the road when we've got everything figured out. But yeah, we'll see, one step at a time.
Yeah, you can't blame me for asking, right?
No, I don't blame you.
No, but I get it. Maybe that'll be on my list of questions to ask you in a couple of years as well. But
cool.
But the Seeds of Wellbeing podcast that we're recording this for is focused on helping Hawaii ag producers on all the islands. So I guess any words of advice or any parting wisdom you'd want to share with our target audience before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's anything novel that hasn't been shared before, but we have lots of challenges that we see at FarmLink, and this week is no different. It's always some new challenge, but I think, just encourage folks to, focus on building versus excluding or destroying, as I mentioned earlier. Like, try to combat any cynicism of, thinking like, oh, those people over there, they're evil, or they're doing something wrong, I don't want to work with them. Like, you can always save that for later, but like, try to like I just encourage everybody to, if you think a farm is doing something you don't like, or a company is doing something you don't like, or a human is doing something you don't like, instead of just like writing them off, be curious, try to push the cynicism for step 2, and just go engage. Try to build something and create something, and be collaborative and be communicative and transparent, and like, put the effort in. It's harder, it's more uncomfortable, but the outcome is so much freaking better. And then if it turns out they really are an asshole, then okay, you can go do the other thing. Like, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But yeah, try to create something, try to do it together, and just be open and curious, and persistent. Jim, you're super persistent, and I think that's such an essential attribute too. Like, it's not easy. You're gonna hit a million challenges, but try to just, relish that moment and those challenges, and try to surround yourself with people, either, inside your company, or if you're just a single operator, in your social network, shoot me an email, whoever. Surround yourself with people that, help you continue to do that. And yeah, we can do it together. I'm way more optimistic than ever. And yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff to do together, for sure.
We want to thank Rob for sharing his mana'o and sharing his story of FarmLink's past, present, and future. If you want to know more about some of the topics we discuss, look for those links in the show notes. I think we've proven that you're a geek for good, but it sounds like maybe a farmer for good too as well. So
yeah, definitely trying to do it for good. I am a geek. I'm a recovering farmer. That's what I like to say. Gabe and their whole crew, and Larnie, growing flowers. They're the real farmers. My fingernails are real clean nowadays.
Well, thanks for all that you're doing for the island, for the islands, and for the farming community. It takes all the pieces, right? And some of it farmers, ag producers don't want to do, like you've been describing, and like we kind of all know, we don't really want to have to do it all, but are kind of required to if you're small scale.
Yeah.
So the things that you bring can really alleviate some of or take the things off our list that we really don't want to have to do, many of us. So thanks again.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, telling the story and getting the word out there, and bringing people together like you do, is super important too. It's totally part of it. So yeah, I appreciate you and what you're doing here.
The intention of these podcast series is to create a safe space for respectful and inclusive dialogue with people from across a broad and diverse spectrum involved in growing and making accessible the food we share together. A diversity of voices, perspectives, and experiences can serve to deepen mutual understanding, to spark creative problem solving, and provide insight into the complexities of our agricultural system. If you, our listeners, have experiences with Hawaii agriculture ecosystem, from indigenous methods, permaculture, smallholder farmers, to large, including multinational agricultural industrial companies, and everywhere in between, and you would like to share your story, please contact us. We welcome your voices and perspectives.